This is Everybody Pulls the Tarp with your host, Andrew Moses. Each week, Andrew talks with Olympians, pro athletes, TV stars, Grammy winners, best-selling authors, CEOs, and other high performers to uncover their success secrets.
My guest is Washington Commanders running back Austin Ekeler.
Every day we write a page of our life. The best thing is you have the pen in your hand.
Three-time Olympic gold medalist Tessa Virtue. Welcome back to Everybody Pulls the Tarp.
Thanks for thinking of me, and I'm a big fan of the podcast and of yours. So anytime you text or call, I'm here.
Mike Mills from REM.
The key to that was realizing at some point fairly early on that this was probably our life's work.
Every conversation is jam-packed with inspiration and actionable ideas.
My guest is 2023 WNBA Coach of the Year, Stephanie White.
The hardest thing for a coach is trying to prioritize how much time you put in one area or another.
Former MLB player, coach, and manager Clint Hurdle.
That is the best title of any podcast out there in America, and the content matches up to it. Andrew, you do a fantastic job. I'm a big fan. Keep up the great work.
World-renowned organizing expert Shira Gill.
You can improve your life simply by removing things.
Get ready for a behind-the-scenes look at the techniques, processes, and mindsets powering the world's most successful people.
Let's go. Hi, friends, and welcome back to Everybody Pulls the Tarp. Well, listeners, this week my guest is trumpeter, singer-songwriter, and band leader Jon Lampley. Jon is a touring member of O.A.R. and for more than a decade was a core member of the house band on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Jon also co-founded the high-energy jazz-funk ensemble Hunter Tones. He is widely considered one of the most versatile brass players of his generation, with his work bridging modern jazz, soul, gospel, and contemporary roots music. Jon grew up in the Akron, Ohio area, and credits church music with shaping his sound and philosophy. He learned trumpet by ear, and over time developed his own musical style that is centered on connection and intention. Jon went on to study at Ohio State University, where he continued to hone his craft. And in 2011, while a junior at Ohio State, Jon received a voicemail from Jerry DePizzo, a member of the band O.A.R. Turns out, O.A.R. was looking to add a horn section to the band's tour performances and was pointed towards Jon by a mutual contact. Jerry went to see Jon perform at an upcoming gig, and a few weeks later, Jon was on stage with O.A.R. The rest is history. Jon became a touring member of O.A.R. in 2011 and has been dazzling audiences in amphitheaters and arenas with the band ever since. In 2013, shortly after graduating from Ohio State, Jon moved to New York, where he continued touring with O.A.R., but was also performing on his own locally in New York, further honing his craft and building relationships in the music community. He caught the attention of Jon Batiste, and the two began performing together as well. Eventually, Batiste would invite Jon to become a core member of the house band on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. And from that point forward, Jon juggled it all, touring with O.A.R., performing on The Late Show, and a variety of other endeavors as well. Today, Jon still tours with O.A.R. and continues to take on his own new creative challenges as well. Most recently, on February 11th, Jon announced his own new album that will be available in June. In the conversation you are about to hear, Jon pulls back the curtain on his journey and many of the success secrets that have helped him reach the pinnacle of his craft. You'll hear many of the mindsets, ideas, and decisions that have powered Jon to the top of the music industry. Listeners, so much of Jon's success is the product of his extraordinary work ethic, humble mindset, remarkable self-awareness, and tireless attention to detail. His story is absolutely inspiring, and the ideas we explored in our conversation apply far beyond music and will help all of us make the most of opportunities in our own lives. I hope you take away as much from this one as I have. Oh, and one more thing. This podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. It is not intended to be a substitute for the advice of a physician, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional. So, let's pull the tarp and get straight to Jon Lampley. Welcome to Everybody Pulls the Tarp, Jon.
Andrew, thank you so much for having me. Very excited to be talking to you today.
What's your first memory of music?
Man, that is a great question. And my first memory of music would not be me performing. It would actually be waking up on Sunday mornings. And in my mind, I'm probably in second or third grade. And I grew up in a very churchy family, a family where we were at church every Sunday, and Sunday school would start at 9:30 and go straight to service. But before we even got to church, I'd wake up and I could hear my mom singing these old church songs by herself in the bathroom as she's getting ready, doing her hair, putting on her jewelry, and just hearing her sing these songs by herself. And my mom has a really lovely voice, but it's funny because I associate those sounds with waking up, and her voice was lovely. And these were the songs that I came to know first, like hymns like "'Tis So Sweet to Trust in Jesus," "Amazing Grace," like old school gospel songs that are the foundation of my whole upbringing. But I also associated them with like, dang, I got to wake up and go to Sunday school now. So it's kind of like this dual thing of my mom's voice, but also this recognition of like, man, I wish I could sleep until 10 and watch cartoons and not have to go to church for 6 hours today. I would say that's my earliest music memory, if you will.
And then fast forwarding, when was the first time you said to yourself, okay, I want to either sing a song, I want to write a song, or I want to pick up an instrument? Talk about that for a moment.
Yeah. So for me, being a kid who grew up in the Midwest, like I said, grew up in a very churchy family, and I was surrounded by music from a very young age. A lot of my cousins played at church. My mom sang at church. Aunts and uncles were preachers, choir members, choir directors. But the first time I really kind of, I guess, the active decision of making music started shortly after that. My mom wanted to get me into piano lessons. So probably around third or fourth grade, I started playing some piano. She found me a piano teacher. Her name was Mrs. Song, of all names. Pretty funny. But that was kind of really where it started, just learning the basic scales and chords. And the other thing that I always liked to do was play by ear. So, I'd have the sheet music where I'd be playing this and that. But immediately, as soon as I could kind of find my way around the keys a little bit, I would start trying to play stuff that I heard at church, that I heard on the radio. And that would kind of become a core piece of my whole approach to music, not just trying to play what was in front of me, but using my ears and instincts to just kind of sound out what was happening. Shortly after that, fifth grade is the year where, they're like, all right, we're going to bring the band instruments in if you want to pick an instrument. And that was the first time I touched a trumpet. You can try all the instruments. Clarinet, couldn't get a sound out. Trombone, it was cool, but didn't really like the slide. But the trumpet was the one instrument that day that I could get a sound out of it very naturally. I'm sure the sound was not good, but it came pretty simply. I came home, I was like, all right, Mom, I want to be in band. I want to play the trumpet. It's like, all right, here we go. And so that was the beginning of that whole journey, which is crazy because, I've been playing that instrument for now almost 25 years.
What do you remember most about the early days with the trumpet? I mean, did it come easy? Did you feel like you made progress quickly and cultivated a skill? Talk about that.
What I remember was, first of all, the fifth grade band instructor, who was also the high school band director, Mr. Lenzo, was the one responsible for teaching all these fifth graders how to play whatever the instrument was. And I remember him standing up on the podium, kind of like pointing to the trumpets, like, no, like go like this, don't play too loud. Like I remember that. But more personally, I remember feeling a little frustrated because the piano, it's like you put your fingers down and the sound comes out, right? It's like it takes a while to kind of figure out how to make it sound okay. But if you push down that C note, a C note comes out. With the trumpet, you got to actually figure out how to fix your face and push the air to create the sound. And so it was frustrating at first for somebody who from a very young age wanted to be very good at whatever he was doing, whether that be basketball or playing the trumpet or playing the piano or playing a board game. So to initially play the instrument and for the sound to not be good was a little frustrating for me. But I think it was one of the earliest versions of myself figuring out, okay, well, if you want to get good at this, you have to actually like work at it. You have to figure out like, well, how do you fix your face to make a good sound? And then how do you repeat doing that? And so I think the process of, within a couple of years being able to have a more consistent trumpet sound was one of the first times that it was like, hey, like you're not naturally going to be good at this. You've never touched this thing before. This is a foreign thing. So you're going to actually have to practice and be patient with the process. And, I'm not processing all of that as a fifth grader, but that's what's happening. And so those are kind of my earliest memories with that instrument are, oh, this is hard, but let me figure out how to get a good sound. But also kind of the reward when you wake up the next day and you're like, oh man, like I remember that scale. It's a little easier to play than it was yesterday. Or, oh, I can play that C above the lower C and it doesn't sound as crappy as it did yesterday. The feeling of improvement from a very early age.
Jon, I'm curious. I want to dig in a little more to something that you said a moment ago. You alluded to this idea of kind of always having this passion to be great at things. That's been a central part of your story. You talked about it in the context of music, of basketball, of board games. Where do you think that comes from?
I think that is rooted in, I would say, two very specific things. One is kind of the type of religious background that I grew up in, very much rooted in this idea that God wants all of us to succeed and to kind of be the best versions of ourselves. So regardless of what you believe, this idea that the creator of the world or the person that's pulling the strings, the universe, wants you to ultimately succeed, be great. And so from a very young age, being around that sort of kind of tutelage or doctrine, whatever you want to call it, I think planted something deep in me that I wasn't even aware of. That was like, if I'm going to do something, the universe wants me to be good at it. Not saying that like I'm not going to have to put in work, but ultimately, if I'm approaching something, the ability to be great at it is inherent. So I would say that is element number one. That's kind of more of a unconscious thing that kind of seeped in because of how I was raised. Number two, I had an extremely ambitious family. Like a lot of my older cousins, I'm an only child, but like a lot of my older cousins were just very, very good at whatever they were doing. I had a cousin who was an unbelievable athlete, natural athlete, football, basketball. So I looked up to him. I had cousins who were valedictorians of their graduating classes in college and could play a bunch of instruments, and everybody got great grades because that was what was expected. So there was almost like a standard within my family of as you get older, you're going to be great. Leah was great. Joey was great. Michael was great. Nathan was great. I'm just listing off my cousins who have done all these amazing things. And so I'm like second, third, fourth, fifth grade. It's almost like, of course I'm going to get straight A's because Nathan's a valedictorian, because my cousin Michael is the best. Of course I'm going to be good at basketball because my cousin Jamin is like the starting point guard and scoring 25 points a game. So it was almost like there was a standard of excellence for me from a very young age. And I think that was kind of the beginning of wanting to be good at whatever I was approaching. And that has kind of fueled a lot of my endeavors my entire life, I'd say.
Jon, what did that look like as a kid, right? Because like wanting to be great and then trying to execute on that plan are two very different but related things. I mean, what did that look like for you? I mean, when you were working hard at something, what did that look like?
It looked like my mom initially being like, I'm setting the timer for an hour and you're going to sit down and practice piano until the timer goes off. And eventually the timer goes away and it's like, I'm going to sit down at the piano with this exercise until I can play it accurately. Or it's, I fast forward to the summer where my mom is like, hey, I know you're not in school right now, but before you go out and play, and my mom was a teacher, so She was very adamant about my own education. But okay, summertime, before you go out and play, I'm going to put together this 45 minutes of worksheets and educational computer games that you're going to have to do before you go out and have fun. So there was always this element of like, you have to put in the work to better yourself before or alongside of whatever else you're doing. And eventually that started to bake in as I got to middle school and high school without mom or dad having to be like, hey, sit down and do your homework. As it pertained to sports, I grew up in the wake of LeBron James. When I was in 5th grade, my dad was like, hey, get in the car. We're going to St. Vincent St. Mary High School. We're going to go watch this freshman. And I was, I loved basketball. I'd been playing. And to see LeBron do what he was doing at 15 years old, and then to continue to watch that through my entire career, it was like, oh, wow, he's from Akron. I can be great too. And then, it was going to the rec center during the summer and just playing pickup basketball all day, trying to get better and better. My dad dropping me off at a gym, and the first time he was there getting cooked by everybody, but coming back and earning the respect of everybody that was playing there by just getting a little bit better every single time. These are the different ways in which I think I was trying to kind of improve myself. Always wanted to be great. Always wanted to get straight A's. And it wasn't necessarily because my mom wanted me to. I just knew that it was like, okay, this is like the best you can do at school. And you know that if you can maintain this through high school, that you're going to have opportunities in college. So it was just kind of like, again, it started as maybe my parents or my family setting me up, inspiring me. And eventually it was just this inner motivation to be great all the way through. And again, these things just kind of carried through my entire life, where it was like, when I get to college, everybody's like, oh, nobody makes the Ohio State marching band as a freshman. And for me, it was like, oh, I'm going to make it. Like, there's no doubt in my mind. And I did make it. And it's a big part of that mentality is just the setup of the way that it was instilled into me by my parents and by looking up to my family.
Jon, so that's a great segue into the time at Ohio State. So my understanding is that you went to Ohio State, and really the central musical ambition at that point was to play tuba in the Ohio State marching band. You just mentioned it there. Very rare for someone as a freshman to make the marching band. And you said, I'm going to do it. But music as a career was not part of the equation at the beginning of your time at Ohio State. Is that correct?
That is correct. So growing up in Talmadge, it's a very small town, and there were not a lot of people who were pursuing careers in the arts other than like your music teacher, your art teacher. And so I excelled. I got good grades. I was on the basketball team, but also did a lot of music in high school, was in different bands, played at church, played trumpet at church. And it was something that I loved. And it was something that I was good at because I played a lot. But there wasn't a possibility in my mind that it was like, oh, you can do this for a living, because it wasn't something that I saw people do around me. People played at church, people taught. I'm forever grateful to my high school band director, Mr. Lenzo, who was the one who I was telling you about that taught us all how to play in 5th grade. There was some award ceremony. I got some award for something, and he looked at me. He was like, hey, man, I know you're looking to go to school for psychology or whatever, but if you want to do this for a living, you can. And it was the first time anybody had ever said that to my face. It was the first time that somebody expressed like, yo, man, like there is a living to be made in this. And if you want to do that, you can achieve it. And I remember at the time I was like, wow, like I never even really thought of that. But at that point I had declared, my major was going to be like psychology and pre-med, and I was going to go figure it out. But the only thing that I knew that I wanted to do was be in the Ohio State University marching band. I've been obsessed with Ohio State culture since I was a kid. It was something that I really shared with my dad. I started going to games when I was like in 1st or 2nd grade. I think the first Ohio State game I went to was when they played Notre Dame, and Eddie George ran for like 300 yards. So, hooked from the beginning with the football team, the whole culture of it, but particularly the marching band. And so I think I was in like 6th grade, and I was like, you know what? I want to dot the I. I'm going to go to that school, and I'm going to do that. And that ambition was like kind of the only thing that I really knew that I wanted to do when I went to Ohio State. Ended up making the marching band. And it wasn't until the end of my freshman year, I lived in a dorm. It was a dorm where a lot of arts majors lived. And so there were like aspiring dancers, aspiring graphic designers, aspiring visual artists, a ton of musicians who were majoring in these creative arts that were just, I'd get home from classes and everybody's doing their homework, but it's like drawing or choreographing a piece, or there were practice rooms in the basement. I'd be down there doing laundry and I'd hear people practicing. And I was like, man, like this thing is pulling at me, It's like I could have a life where I finish out med school and become a psychiatrist and help people and connect people that way. But like, I feel that the thing that I really want to do is music. And it wasn't like it was a crystallized vision of like, I want to write songs, or I want to write instrumental music, or I want to play trumpet, but I could feel that like I want to be doing that. I want to be dedicating this time, this college time, to growing as an artist and figuring out what that life looks like for me. And by the end of my freshman year, I just pulled the trigger. I was like, you know what? I'm going to switch majors and I'm going to pursue music for a living. And I was really fortunate I received an academic scholarship to go to Ohio State on a full ride. And when I went to like the offices, I was like, hey, I want to change my majors. They were like, hey, you can major in whatever you want. Scholarship is still yours. So I was really grateful for that. But I told my parents towards the end of that year, hey, Mom and Dad, I want to do music. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I know I want to do this for a living and I'm going to switch majors. Neither of them were happy about that at all. They were like, oh my gosh, our son, all this promise, and he's going to be like broke and like playing on the street, or he's, because that was the association from a small town. People who do music, you're either like a music teacher that doesn't make a lot of money, or you're like a burnout. And I was like, you know what? At the time, I was really frustrated because I wanted them to support me. Now that I'm older, I'm like, I totally get it. My parents love me very much, and they just couldn't see a path that they had no access to, But I didn't know what my life in music was going to be. I just really knew that was what I wanted my life to be. And kind of tying it back to what we were talking about earlier, I felt that if I were to step more into the purpose of what my life is, I knew that everything would fall into place. Kind of this faith that it was like, okay, you have to put in the work, this is going to be difficult, but if you point the ship in the direction that it's supposed to be going, the wind is going to push the sails. And that's something that is like a core tenet, I think, of my entire philosophy to life. It's like, if you are paying attention to your own desires, but also kind of the signs that day-to-day life is showing you, if you start to point yourself in the direction that you're supposed to go, God, in my opinion, but to others, the universe, whatever people want to think of it as, will start to show you like, oh yes, this is the way that I'm supposed to be going. And everything that happened like after I made that decision is indicative of that. Like, things just started to happen, and we can get into that, but I truly believe that if you, and I mean, I'm sure you felt this too, like when you find that thing and it's like you start to actually pursue it, just good things start to happen. It's almost like a snowball,
After that moment where you point yourself in that direction, decide to kind of go all in on this, when do you pivot to essentially being a performing musician outside of the Ohio State University marching band? Is that when you essentially got, created the Hunter Tones and you start performing?
So, yes, I switched majors, started taking all music classes, started studying with an incredible trumpet professor. His name was Kenyatta Beasley, amazing musician. But about a year into my sophomore year was when I formed this relationship with Dan White and Chris Ott, who are the co-founders of the band Hunter Tones. And I watched them play. They were a year and 2 years older than me. I watched them play and I was like, wow, like these guys are really good. Dan at saxophone, Chris at trombone. But also Dan was like very ambitious in that I think he was like a sophomore or junior. He was a junior when I met him. He was already trying to like book shows at coffee shops and play his own music in town. I was like, wow, like that's awesome. And so I think developing a relationship with them and starting to play music with them was the first time that I was like in a band. And initially we weren't called Hunter Tones, but we were making music together, and we started to book shows at tiny venues around Columbus and play together. This was also the first time I wrote music. Basically, Dan and Chris had written a bunch of music, and I was like, let me try to write something for this band. And that was the first time I'd ever written something. That wasn't even something that had like entered my mind. I just wanted to play and like play other people's music, perform. I will say this though, as a performer, I think growing up in the type of church that I grew up in was the beginning of like the performance thing for me. I was playing trumpet at church from an early age. I didn't consider that professional. That was just like, yeah, of course I'm going to play at church because that's what everybody does that is a musician. But also like the type of church that I grew up in, it was a Pentecostal church, the type of church where like the music is banging and the preachers are like real loud and people will be running and jumping and shouting. But particularly whoever is like on the stage, on the pulpit, whether it be like a choir, praise team singing, musicians, there's this element of kind of reading the room, reading the spirit, and acting as a conduit of what's happening in the spirit to the audience through the music that you're making. And so by playing at church, I was kind of developing and learning from the people who were doing that at church. And so when I started to perform with Dan and Chris, when we'd play shows, I feel like I was bringing that element into these performances almost, again, unconsciously, you know, if that makes sense. You know, I'd be very animated when I would play music, or I'd be very kind of not just trying to be up there playing the parts, but connecting with the audience, understanding like, oh, like this song's a little bit more high energy. That person over there in the back's kind of feeling it. Let me like connect with them a little bit. And then this person over there sees that and they feel a little bit looser. Like I was doing that kind of stuff even from when we first started playing shows. And so I think that that's kind of the beginning of my performing outside of church, was playing these shows with Dan and Chris with 100 Tones. And eventually, you know, about 2 years in, we were playing 2 or 3 times a month in bars and clubs, at little banquets here and there. And the more that was happening in tandem with practicing every day, in tandem with all the marching band stuff, the more comfortable I felt performing, if that makes sense.
All right, everyone. We'll get back to the conversation momentarily. But first, I want to tell you about my free weekly email newsletter, Tarp Pullers. Each week, I share an uplifting and inspirational tarp pulling story that is sure to brighten your day. And I also highlight some of the most powerful ideas I've learned on my journey talking to 200 and counting of the world's top performers. The newsletter is short, concise, and a reader recently told me this. She said it makes her day every time it hits her inbox. Go to everybodypullsthetarp.com/newsletter to sign up today. So then, Jon, in 2011, you get a voicemail from one of the guys in O.A.R. And this sets in motion an incredible turn of events. Talk to me about the circumstances that led to that phone call, because one of the consistent themes through all of my conversations with the world's top performers in any craft is that people don't get lucky. They put themselves in positions to have some good fortune. And I'm curious, talk about that moment. You get that voicemail from one of the guys in O.A.R. and it sets in motion a series of events that really changed your life in the arc of your career in many ways. Talk about that. What was going on in that period of time? What led to that phone call?
So this was my junior year of college. And I think that the circumstances leading into this were interesting because I had started to establish myself as kind of a young musician on the Columbus scene. Like, oh, hey, there's this trumpet player at Ohio State that's like pretty good. And I was starting to play with different types of bands. There was like a hip hop fusion band led by a trombone player that I'd be playing with a lot. There were various kind of just horn section things where it was like, hey, we need a horn section for this recording session. Call Jon. Like, he's pretty good. He can knock it out. So I was starting to become like a young player that people were talking about on the Columbus music scene as a college student. And I was doing that by just, again, like hours and hours sitting in a room practicing trumpet by myself, like hours and hours just isolated, figuring out the instrument, figuring out the technique, but then also just saying yes to whatever. Hey, man, can you come play this 2-hour gig for $10? Totally. Hey, can you come do this recording session? Yes. Hey, can you come do this? Like, what? Just putting myself out there. And so by that point, it was like I was playing a lot out in the Columbus scene. The band that me, Dan, and Chris had established was doing a lot more. Like, more people were coming to our shows. We'd started to have these house parties where we'd invite people over and play music, and those were blowing up. And on the other side of that coin, I had my first real relationship when I got to college. And because of the amount of time and energy that I was putting towards music, I broke that relationship off. So I was very bummed about that, very sad about that. Another really interesting wrinkle to this that I don't know if I've talked about a ton publicly is that me, Dan, and Chris found an opportunity for basically every year at Disneyland in California. Through the summer, there is a band that is kind of like a performance band that performs throughout the park. They have big band shows, and the name of this band was it's like Disneyland All-American College Band. And they were holding auditions in the Midwest. College kids audition from all over the country. And if you get this gig, it's like you're at Disneyland for a summer. You get to play a bunch of music for 3 months. It's like a highly coveted thing. And so me, Nate, and Chris all drove to Indiana to audition for this band. And all of us auditioned. I actually auditioned on trumpet and tuba, and it went really, really well. And a few months later, this would have probably been winter of that junior year, we get the emails, and Dan and Chris got in. I didn't get in, didn't get selected. Apparently, it was like, oh, it was between you and like one other guy who was a tuba player, and he was just like a little bit stronger of a tuba player, and he could read music really well, so we went with him. And I was like, dang. Because, I mean, at this point in time, it's like, you know, like I said before, I worked hard. Most of the things that I would shoot for or try for, I was able to achieve. And this was one of the first times I was like, sorry, bud, you weren't good enough. You didn't make the cut. But my best friends did. Obviously, I was very excited for them. But yeah, I was kind of bummed about that, right? I was like, dang. Fast forward a couple of months, I get this call from Jerry. And Jerry's a saxophone player in O.A.R. He's like, hey, man, my name's Jerry. I play in this band called O.A.R. And the band is looking to add a horn section to the touring version of what we do. I reached out to a friend of mine, Chris Keith, who's an amazing local musician, but also happened to be a college professor at Ohio State. And I was playing in one of his ensembles at the time. And Jerry was like, I asked him about trumpet players. Your name came up, and I wanted to see if you had any gigs coming up that I could come see you play at. And I was like, yeah. And there was a show that I was playing with another trombone player, invited Jerry out. He came. Show went well. Jerry ended up jumping up on stage with us and playing. A week after that, he was like, hey, man, you guys sound great. O.A.R. has a show in Columbus in April. Here are these 5 songs. Learn them, and you guys can play with us. And when I tell you, I'll never forget getting onto that stage for the first time. And I mean, at this point, outside of the marching band, you know, like the big at the shoe with 105,000 people, like, but that's like a very specific thing. The biggest show that I've been a part of is maybe like 40 or 50 people at a dive bar. And to jump up on stage with O.A.R. in Columbus, Ohio, in front of 3,000 people, Jerry makes fun of me all the time. He's like, yeah, man, I looked over at you and you look like you were about to like crap your pants, which I mean, in all honesty, I probably was. But it was just so surreal. We played a couple songs that night with them, and it went really well, and then got invited to do the rest of that summer tour, which was crazy because I was still in college. But it's also like this really valuable lesson for me, in that I was really bummed about this opportunity that I missed out on, when in reality, a much bigger opportunity was right around the corner, that there was no way that I could see that. And I think that, like I said, I'm about to go into my 15th year with O.A.R. That's something that has become an integral part of my life and career, and those guys are family. But there's no way to know the opportunities that are coming for you. And this is kind of what you were alluding to earlier. You got to get ready, you got to stay ready, and you have to put yourself on the scene. You have to put yourself in position. I consider myself very blessed to have received that opportunity, but the reality is, when that opportunity presented itself, I was prepared for it. My musicianship was at a point where I could take on the gig. I was willing to learn. You know, I feel like I came into that band, and even at the end of that first tour, I was a way better musician because I learned a lot. The areas where if I couldn't play as high and this part was high, I was like, all right, this is something I need to work on. Learning what it was to have performance stamina, all these things I learned. And it really was just a matter of being in position for the opportunity when it came, not knowing what that opportunity was going to be.
Jon, I'm so fascinated by all of that. I mean, what an incredible turn of events and a powerful reminder, like you said, that something that seems disappointing in one moment, the next moment, if you keep walking that path, actually becomes the opportunity that creates the opportunity.
Right.
And your story is such a great example of that. I'm so fascinated by your entire story, but in particular, now I want to dig into this whole piece with O.A.R. because it's fascinating to me for many, many reasons. I mean, you've been a touring member of the band for a very, very long time, as you mentioned there. When I think of O.A.R., I think of Jon Lampley in many ways. Such an integral piece. But it wasn't always that way. It became something more solidified. You became more integral and integrated with the band over a horizon of time. I'm curious in particular to go back to those early days, because this idea doesn't just apply to music. I think there's plenty of people listening who are walking into new environments where something's already established, already successful. You want to make an impact, a positive impact, but you don't want to overstep the boundaries. Talk about that for a minute. Like, how did you think about that in the early days? I'm going to make an impact. I'm going to be myself, but I also have to be very, very cognizant of this very successful thing that's already been built that I'm becoming a part of.
This may be one of the best questions that anybody has ever asked me as it pertains to like my own experience with O.A.R. I think that coming into a band that had the amount of success that this band has had across the career that they had already had, talking many, many hit songs, platinum records, selling out Madison Square Garden. Very intimidating to walk into a band that has done that, being a college student that feels like they're just figuring out how to play their instrument. But the more intimidating piece of it was walking into a group of guys that had been friends since 8th grade. You're walking into a situation where people have grown together, have navigated a treacherous music industry together from a young age, have had their own triumphs and difficulties, and figured out how to weave and work their way through these things. And I'm now coming into the fold as a 21-year-old kid around a bunch of grown men who have families and children and are figuring this thing out. And so there was certainly a level of intimidation that I felt coming into that. Not necessarily because anybody was acting a certain way, but just because of the nature of the situation. Something that I made it a point to do, particularly in those first years, was always be respectful of the situation. I feel like I was hyper aware of wanting to be prepared musically, do my part, learn my parts, be a great performer, continue to grow in that way, but also like always follow the rules on the tour bus, always be on time. There was one time, it's a very crazy story, where I was late for lobby call because I went out and had my one night, and it has never happened again since then. But outside of that one wild night, it was like being early when it was time to go, being on time. Like if the guys were having a meeting, make sure I'm out of the way. Always wanting to let the guys know that it was like, I understand that this is a massive opportunity for me, and I only want to be respectful of that. And I think across the years, when the guys saw that that was my attitude, they started to kind of slowly welcome me into the circle more and more, both socially, but also musically. And I think that in any sort of situation, like you said, when you're coming in as an outsider, it's so important to recognize that you have to believe in who you are and what you bring to the table, right? Even from an early age, it's like, okay, I recognize that I'm here because like Jerry wants me to be here. They understand that what I do adds to this thing and has the potential to continue to add to this thing. But also you have to recognize that you're entering a situation that has existed without you, and that there is a specific dynamic that it is essential that you respect. And I think that because I approach that dynamic with respect in those early years, every year they trusted me with a little more responsibility. Year 2, hey, we're going to give you a background vocal mic and maybe you can sing a little bit. Years 3 and 4, Mark, walks up to me, hey man, you actually sound really good. Do you want to sing like a verse on Peace? You know, it's like this trust in me developed because I showed respect to them. And when they recognized, oh, we can let him in to be a part of this dynamic, my role in the band started to grow, playing on more songs, singing on more things. And fast forward 15 years, it's like I've written a bunch of songs with this band, you know, and even outside of the music part of it, these guys are family to me. And all of that started with this balance in those early years of not being afraid to bring my musicianship and my energy to the table, but also being very aware and respectful of not trying to overstep any dynamics, both on stage and behind the scenes. And to anybody who's, like I said, entering a different workplace, entering a different band environment, moving into a new city, whatever it is, entering a different phase in life, it's just so important to hold an awareness of the dynamic that you're stepping into, while also not necessarily withholding yourself, if that makes sense.
It does, Jon. I'm curious on the idea of awareness. What do you think is really like the biggest key to that self-awareness?
I think for me, it's being able to listen both to when somebody is telling you like, hey, here's an explicit piece of advice that I'm telling you, and to take heed of that, to internalize it and to put it into practice, but also, and maybe more importantly, to kind of be aware and take the cues that are not explicit. I'll give you an example. Like, if there's something that I do play, or a moment where I step to a certain part of the stage and I see a positive reaction from the guys, clocking that and being like, okay, maybe I can do those kind of things more proactively. On the converse side of that, if maybe there's a conversation happening and I maybe step in and try to give some advice and there's like a look that's like, clocking that and being like, hey, when these two guys are speaking about certain things, find a place to go, and maybe there's another way, or like kind of don't offer input if it's not asked. I think kind of really paying attention to the explicit things that are said, but also kind of just always paying attention and taking cues, always learning too. Like, you know, I've learned so much as a performer watching Mark perform, watching the way that he balances, like, I'm going to truck through these 3 or 4 songs without talking, and then I'll talk a little bit. And as the show gets looser, I'll talk a little more. And then kind of like incorporating that into what I do and seeing guys be like, yeah, exactly. Or just kind of watching Jerry play saxophone, the way that he paces out his solos, being like, hey, like, let me not blast all of my stuff at the beginning. Let me tell a story. Just learning from the different things that you see and then incorporating that into what you're doing. And then seeing that once the guys see that you're learning those things, they trust you with whatever it is, more solos, more responsibility. I think that's really it's like stuff we learn when we're kids, right? Pay attention to context clues, right? You don't want to just be learning exactly what the teacher is saying, but like you want to be learning from what they're doing as well, that kind of stuff.
Jon, one of your many great skills is juggling a lot of different things concurrently. So I want to dig into another piece of your career. You leave Ohio State, you move to New York, and pretty quickly, the opportunity presents itself to be a part of the house band on the Stephen Colbert Show. How does that come to be? And then more importantly, how do you start juggling all these different tremendous opportunities at the same time while not squandering any of them?
So shortly after graduating college, I want to say maybe 6 or 7 months, lived in Columbus a little bit. Me, Dan, and Chris were living together in Columbus, working on some music, and we made the decision that we wanted to move to New York. We wanted to do this for a living. We wanted to take it to the next level. I had been fortunate enough to be touring with O.A.R for going into my 3rd year with them. So I had a little bit of a financial cushion to be like, all right, I'm going to move to the most expensive city in America. And, you know, it is what it is. So we moved there. We live in a tiny apartment and immediately hit the ground just networking. we knew some people that lived in New York to be like, hey, come to this spot, bring your horns, sit in on a jam session, meet some new people. That leads to us, playing regularly at a hotel with like a soul jam cover band. And just really the whole thing with the music industry, whether you're a songwriter, whether you're a musician, you have to insert yourself into the scene that it is happening in. And so very quickly, like I said, we were putting ourselves out there as a trio of horn players, but also individually as like our own selves as musicians. And so I started to gain opportunities through that networking. I started playing with this amazing band, Red Barat. It was like a go-go band that fused Indian music with hip hop, and I was playing tuba with them, and I got to go overseas with them. I started playing with a band called Sammy Miller and the Congregation, a group of amazing musicians that all went to Juilliard, and they were playing like the music of Duke Ellington and presenting that music in a way that was engaging both people who love jazz, but also young people. And I was playing trumpet and tuba with them. And we were playing a show one night, and Jon Batiste was in the audience. I didn't even know, or rather, I'm sorry, Jon Batiste's drummer, Joe, was in the audience. And I didn't know much about who Jon was, but this was right before they announced that he was going to be taking over the band leader spot at Colbert. So apparently Joe heard me play, saw I was playing trumpet and tuba, and hit up Jon and was like, yo, there's this new guy in town that's playing both instruments. You should check him out. A couple weeks later, I got an email from Jon Batiste's management. It was like, hey, Jon Batiste is playing some shows in the next couple of months. Would you want to be a part of the team? And again, this all just came from like networking, being in the scene, putting myself out there. So I'm like, again, similar to college, absolutely, I'm in. Played the shows, met Jon. We hit it off, I think, because, I tried to be as prepared as possible musically, but I think we have this shared interest in really engaging the audience with the music. And I think that he recognized that in me, and I think he really appreciated that early on. And so I played these shows. We did a couple things in New York, and I did the Newport Jazz Festival with him, which for me was very surreal. It's like I'd been in New York for like a year and a half, and I'm playing with Jon Batiste at like the most storied jazz festival ever. It's like, what? Thank God. Walk into your purpose.
It's like that moment you're walking on stage in front of 3,000 people with O.A.R.
Exactly. It just keeps happening. And again, just pointed to what I said. It's like you follow the path, you point yourself in the right direction, and you put in the work, and these things just continue to show you, yes, this is what you're supposed to be doing. So all of that went well. I went straight from the Newport Jazz Festival to the tour bus with O.A.R. for that summer. And about a month and a half into the O.A.R. tour, I get an email. Hey, this is Dan. I'm the house band manager for The Late Show. Jon wants to know if you want to be a part of The Late Show band team. And it was surreal. I remember showing all the O.A.R. guys on the bus, and they were like, oh my gosh, Jon, this is so amazing. Congratulations. And so, yeah, that fall, 2015, I started playing with Batiste and that incredible band at The Late Show. And kind of to your next point, this was the beginning of this kind of wild juggling act that would happen realistically for the next 5 or 6 years, where basically, and I'm forever grateful to Jon and the staff at The Late Show, I told them, I was like, hey, this is the opportunity of a lifetime, and I want to be here making music on the show with you all as much as I can, but I've become an integral part of these two bands that are really doing a lot right now. O.A.R. was touring every summer, and this was a period of Huntertone's development where we had the opportunity to travel all over the world, both through our own music and booking agency, but also we were doing a lot of work with the U.S. State Department. So it's like we were getting to travel to places like Nigeria and Zimbabwe and Costa Rica and Ecuador and Peru. And, I'm in my mid-20s. I'm like, this is the time that I want to be doing this. And I communicated that to the people at The Late Show, and they were like, look, we want you to be a part of the band. We're willing to let you go do what you need to do whenever you're in town. Just be here. And I was like, thank you so much. That's amazing. But it did become this juggling act where simultaneously I was in the band at The Late Show, I was touring around the world with Huntertones, and then I was playing big shows with O.A.R. And what I think allowed me to do all of those things was the fact that each one of those bands allowed me to be myself. And I think that I wouldn't say that I was like the entire version of my artistry I was able to be with all of these bands, but I was able to be my most genuine self on stage at The Late Show, on stage with O.A.R, and on stage with Hunter Tones. And because I was able to do that, I think it was, I don't want to say easy, but it felt very natural to balance all of these things. Also, I think the skill set necessary for playing different music every day at The Late Show made it easier to learn new O.A.R songs to be able to jump in and out of that world while jumping back to Late Show world, while also jumping back to Hunter Tones world. I think that is a skill that I kind of developed by doing all of these things, is like being able to internalize a lot of music very quickly without having to necessarily spend a bunch of time practicing one specific thing. And so basically between 2015 and 2020, that was my world, where I'd be like at any given year on the road for probably 4 or 5 months between those 3 bands, and then banging it out at The Late Show during the rest of the year. And I mean, it's been amazing. The other piece of this is like, while all of this is happening, I'm slowly gaining more confidence in my own artistry and slowly asking myself, what is the music that you want to write? I was also really fortunate to have, like, Mark Roberge, frontman of O.A.R, has been literally like the biggest champion of like, yo, man, you writing songs yet? Yo, man, take that idea and turn it into a song. Like, and so much of it was like I was surrounded by so many amazing artists who were so good at writing songs, like Mark, John Baptiste. I got to do some touring with Alan Stone, who's an incredible singer-songwriter. And seeing these guys create, I'm like, man, like there's no way, like, you know, I didn't start writing music when I was young, but Mark would be like, man, you got a voice, you got something to say, you got a vision, keep at it. And so during this time, while I'm playing with all these different bands, I'm slowly developing the confidence, slowly kind of trying out new ideas. And I would say when I got to the end of that point, 2020, when COVID hit and everybody kind of went inside, touring went away for a while, coming out of that pandemic period was kind of the real beginning of my own artist journey, where it was like, I'm still doing all of these things, but I'm really actually going to start writing my own music, creating my own projects. And I think the chaos of that 5 years directly contributed to me having a lot more confidence in my own ability to write music, but also kind of create something like a show, you know, an experience, if that makes sense.
One of the things that just strikes me is you pour yourself into every opportunity that's presented to you. And you have also been around people who have embraced that, what you bring to the situation, as you've described, but have also championed and encouraged you to chase more yourself, which I think is just the perfect mix, that so many people who are pursuing big things, they want it themselves, but they're not around people who cheer them on as well. And I'm just struck by your situation. It was both. You had you chasing these things, and you had people who also believed in you, that many of these different parties could have said selfishly for them, hey, I want more of Jon's time for me, or I don't want him to pursue that or split time with this. But they never said that. Right. They said, let's make it work. We want Jon to bring the full Jon.
I feel so fortunate, so blessed, so thankful, so grateful that every entity that I have been able to work with and become a part of has not necessarily approached me with like, hey man, if you want to keep playing with O.A.R, we need you to bail on this stuff. Hey man, if you want to be in this Late Show band, like, we need you and you got to put all that stuff away. Hunter Tones, even the band that I kind of helped found, everybody, and it was kind of something that I had anxiety about. I was a little worried about. I was like, I realized that every time I go do this, I'm taking away from that. The O.A.R guys, literally, they were like, man, we see the potential in you. We love what you have contributed to us and how you've become a part of this family, but we want you to succeed and realize the fullest version of yourself. So whatever you need to go do, we are in full support of that. And to have that kind of support from them has been unbelievable. To have that kind of support from the people at The Late Show, from my friends in Hunter Tones, it's been very, very surreal, because it kind of just frees you up a little bit, you know? There can be some guilt that happens when you're like, like, am I letting these people down? Am I doing this, blah, 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 blah. But the more that I've leaned into my own artistry and kind of pursuing my own opportunities to see the people that are a part of these bands really kind of say, hey, man, go for it. Do it. This is awesome. It's been really encouraging. It's also kind of a relief. And even in the way of just, none of these artists have tried to be like, hey, man, like, that's cool that's how you perform, but can you do it more like this? Everybody's like, look, man, we want you for you and be yourself. We love that. And I really think that anybody who's listening to this, it's very important to surround yourself with people that are going to lift you up, make you want to be better, but also encourage you to be a best version of yourself. Because if you're in a position where you're trying to just fit into whatever you need to be for this or that, not to say that some of that can't be helpful and beneficial, but ultimately, if you're not being sought after, if you're not in the workplace for what you bring to it, eventually the work that you're doing is not going to be sustainable because you're becoming something that you're not. And so I feel very grateful that the longer I've been in this career in music, it's almost like I've just been able to lean more into who I am as a trumpet player, as a performer, and now as a songwriter, as kind of an experience creator. And I would just encourage everybody to really, as you move along in your careers and seek opportunities, lean into yourself and the truest version of what you are, whether it be an artist or an engineer or whatever it is that it is,
Jon, well, you've been around so many people that have supported you and have cheered you on and championed your work. And that certainly says a lot about them. But I also think it says a lot about you. People who believe in you, people who appreciate what you bring to their worlds, and then in turn want to see you chase all of your ambitions as well. I think it says a lot about them, but I think it also says a lot about you as well, Jon.
I appreciate that, man. I feel, like I said, very blessed, very thankful from a very young age to be surrounded by a very supportive community. I say this a lot. I think when you want to do this for a living, when you want to make art, be a performer, specifically be a musician, be somebody who is performing for people, giving the most vulnerable version of yourself to others, it's a very selfish life, if that makes sense. And I think selfish, not trying to say that word and leaning into kind of, people think of selfishness as like cruelty or being mean or inconsiderate. And I think that that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you're spending hours in a room by yourself practicing. You're having to go on the road and be away from loved ones and family. And that's just what the task requires. And so there are a lot of decisions that need to be made that are technically selfish. But I feel very grateful that I've been surrounded by people who have been willing to invest in me in a way that, like, at different points of my career, I've been able to continue to do that. But I think the way you counteract that is A, gratitude, but B, the longer you get to be in it, ultimately you kind of get better at compromising in certain ways, if that makes sense. So it's like you move through this career. Like you said, I've been very fortunate to have a lot of people that have created opportunities for me and invested in me and believed in me. And you get to a point where, while we're on this selfish endeavor of being an artist and a creator and a performer in life, you do realize that it's like, if I want to keep doing this, I have to compromise. I have to be willing to step back when you need to be at home, step back and say, hey, I got to bang this album out, but also, like, I need to spend some time with my girlfriend right now because she's really been missing me, or I need to spend some time with my wife and kids for those who have them. I do think that the older I've gotten, the more I realize that it's like, if you continue to go all in without that awareness and being willing to compromise, I think no matter how much success you achieve, it starts to become empty when it's just about that, if that makes sense.
I'm going to be thinking about this conversation for a long time to come. I can guarantee you this. You have shared so many powerful ideas and such important frameworks, I think, that all of us can apply to almost every aspect of our lives, personally and professionally. Jon, as we get ready to wrap up our conversation, I want to ask you a question. You mentioned earlier this moment when you were in 5th or 6th grade. I think you had said when you went to see LeBron James play as a freshman in high school. Being in that crowd must have elicited some type of emotion and feeling inside you. If there's a 5th or 6th grader at one of your shows today who's looking up at you, watching you do your craft, just as LeBron was doing his back then, what do you want them to feel and think?
Wow. I would want them to feel and think something similar to what I felt watching this 15-year-old kid dazzle the audience and play this game with such joy and skill. I think I want them to think that, wow, like, that is amazing. Not in any sort of way of like, oh, whatever I'm playing or doing is so great, but like, whatever is happening on that stage is bringing me a lot of joy. It's making me feel really good. It's something that I would want to feel again. I think that's kind of a base layer of it. But then the other thing is that I would want them to see whatever I'm doing and feel like I can do that. And I think that was the most powerful thing about seeing LeBron to me was like, yo, this is like 10 minutes from my house. And this is somebody that is from the area that I'm from, who is connected to people that I'm probably connected to, and is able to do this. And I feel like there is a universe in which I could do something like that too. And obviously, I was not going to grow to be 6'8", but if somebody's at a show and they see me doing what I'm doing, I would want them to feel inspired to feel like they could do that, whether it be getting up on a stage and singing or playing, or just whatever they want to go on to do, being able to do it at a very high level in a way that affects a lot of people. I would want them to feel that little seed inside of themselves that could say, man, like, I love how this makes me feel. I want to do that. And I hope that my music, whether it be my own stuff and any of the bands that I play with, I hope that I've been able to inspire that in somebody somewhere.
Jon, there is no question that you are inspiring many, many, many millions of people who watch you perform your craft every single day. This conversation has been absolutely fantastic. I am so grateful for you being so gracious with your time, spending some time with me this week. There is no question in my mind, Jon, you are a tarp puller, a certified member of the Everybody Pulls the Tarp family forever. Thank you so much, Jon, for spending some time with me this week. We'll have to do a part 2 sometime. All right, my friend?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Andrew. I appreciate it.
All right, my friend. We'll talk again soon. Thank you for joining me this week. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you can catch all of our upcoming episodes. And if you are like me and want a world full of tarp pullers, then leave a review to help others find us. You can also follow me on Instagram at AndrewMoses123 and sign up for my email newsletter at everybodypullsthetarp.com/newsletter. I'll share tips and insights to help you achieve maximum success and happiness. Until next time, keep pulling the tarp.